Hi, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to part 2 of the Employee Manager, where we've added file attachments, additional fields. We've added a full scheduling tab as well as a leave tab. We've also added the ability to add employees, which I'm really looking forward to showing you, and they're all based on additions that you have requested, and I've written them all down and we're going to go over them. So I'm really excited to show this to you. Let's get to it. All right, welcome back to part 2 of the Employee Manager. We've got a lot to cover today, and as mentioned in part 1, and if you haven't seen part 1, please do so. I'll include the links in the description for part 1 because we're going to take right off from where we ended up on part 1. And as mentioned before in part 1, we're going to be taking your suggestions very seriously on what to include in this Employee Manager. So let's get started with just that. I have written down all of your suggestions, everything you have commented in both Facebook and YouTube, as well as private messages, and I've got them right here. So let's go over them real quickly so we know what we're going to be focusing on. Eric Pasteur, I'm going to get your names all messed up, so just bear with me. Is it possible to work schedule to be linked to this sheet? Yes, work schedule is something that is common. Even Louis Cadete, I would also like to see a schedule featured linked to the time clock, payroll history. Sure. Yeah, we're going to put that in this week. Now, it's not going to be functioning yet, but we're going to put all the capabilities in there so that we can have that for the future. So we're going to be focused on the schedule because that is an important part. A lot of you have mentioned it. Richard Hainsworth also mentioned, I'm wondering how easy it would be for employees to request annual leave and capture the request decisions and track annual leave, sickness, special leave, and events. Yes, leave, paid or unpaid, is also something that we're going to be focused on in this as far as capturing that data. And so we're going to put in room for that so that we can use that later on for the payroll. So that is important. It would be great to tie this up with a payslip generator. Okay, payslip. We're going to work on that. That's going to be focused in the reports. Once we generate the payroll, we'll have a report section where we can generate payslips. So yeah, that's something that's going to be in the future. So we'll work on that. Disciplinary records. We may put an events manager in here so we can track events per employee. We will cross that bridge a little bit later on depending upon how many people want to see some sort of an events manager tied. So that might be kind of helpful. GDPR requirements. We may add some user security onto this. A few of you have mentioned that to me. So we do have some user security. I think that's going to be kind of important, especially we're going to have some private information like social security numbers. Jules mentioned, would you like to see tabs for employee absence and training? Yeah, we're going to include those tabs. We're going to be adding tabs into this part 2. Annual leave, sickness, suspension, disciplinary. Again, so a lot of you are requesting the same thing. So that really guides me to what areas are important. Jury service and training. Now there's a lot of different types of absence that we can have. So we're going to create an open table where you can create your own type of absence. There's just so many different types. So I think this is, we can't really have a field for everything, but we can create an open table. So we're going to do that. Jan Crude, is it possible to have a work schedule? Yeah, we're going to include that. Mercy Wing, I'd love to see more key employee data captured, such as position, title, company. We'll include some of that today. We're going to add a little bit more as far as populate specific fields in payroll that are only associated with the manager. We'll try to get that in. We do have employee types so that we can include filters later on. Michael Maharlika, messed that name up. I'm sure the tax information would be nice to use code from your attachments project. Attachments, that's a good idea. I like the idea of having attachments for each employee. We're going to add some space for that in this week. So because employees have additional sheets, you know, you may have worksheets, you may have PDFs, you may have filled out forms. So having attachments attached to a specific employee is kind of a nice idea. So we're going to go ahead and add that in as well, at least the spaces for it, and then we'll add in the functionality later because we do have a lot to cover. I don't know how long this training, this series, the employee is going to take. It really depends on your suggestions, or as long as you have interest in it. So make sure you view the entire video. That helps me know that you're interested in this and you want to see this application to completion. We can do a lot as long as you remain interested in absorbing it, and of course sharing and liking this video really helps me understand and know that this is something that you want to see. Chuck Hamden mentioned you could also do a performance review tab, and I think that goes into the events And I think having an events manager would be good, as mentioned before. Kenneth mentioned, I have a proposal regarding working hours in Sweden. Okay, I understand that. You want to know the working hours, how many hours in a week, how many hours in a day. So we're going to include some of that scheduling as far as totaling. So I understand the requirements for that. A lot of you, regardless of the country you're from, you have certain specifications as far as how many hours you can work in a day, in a week, or multiple days. So we're going to put some of that in. Frank, these, I always appreciate Frank's comments. The following groups are years of service, male, female. Okay, we're going to include gender in today's. Yearly sit down. That's again, we're going to go with that in events. I think in having an events manager so that you can put any type of event like a yearly sit down or discussion or something like that and to what occurred in that event would be really nice because there's so many different types of events that can be associated with employees. So I think that's good. A dashboard for department overview. We will probably include a dashboard a little bit later on. Drill down is a nice idea when it comes to payroll and work hours and employees. So we'll try to include some drill down features in this, especially in the reporting. Once we have all the data, then we want to be able to drill down into it. So I think the reporting issue will give us our drill down availability. Perhaps a period to drill down hours work details. Yeah, that's good. Webster Webs, print out the report, pay slip in PDF format. That can be included also in the reporting, and that's going to be at the very end. Once we have all of our data incorporated, then we can focus on the reporting of that and putting it in different formats. So that'll come in the weeks to come. Niran, in this tutorial, would you like to be catered to those HR or current data? Yeah, for sure. This is going to be for HR, and then we're going to data mapping. Data mapping on import's nice. So if you have hours or employees or your data information is in a different type of format, could we import that data? Maybe we can take that into consideration to bring in that data into the hours. So although I would like to have an application that captures all the data itself, as far as hours are concerned, we could build that out, but importing it would be really helpful because a lot of you track those hours in different applications. So that might be something that's a really good idea. So thank you, Niran, for that. Setien, let's just Purohit. Can we add a keyboard shortcuts? That's a nice idea. I like that. Keyboard shortcuts on tab. Maybe next week we're going to tackle that. And that's moving from tab to tab using a keyboard shortcut. So I do like that idea. Charles is always really a great big fan of ours. Would it be possible for you to demonstrate what changes would be necessary to scale this application so that it can handle from 100 to 1,000? Yeah, definitely. This application should be capable of handling thousands of employees. So I think that's a great idea, and we'll try to build it and make sure it's scalable so that it can handle a lot of employees. And we'll go over some of that and how we're going to do that today when we add in the employee tables. I was thinking that you could use the list box for employee lookup. Yeah, we're going to have we're going to work on autocomplete so that when you start typing in the employee name comes automatically. We got a lot to cover today. K102 Stone, could you add time off request, vacation time, sick leave? Yes, we're going to add that in today. And are you going to add security levels? I think so. I think that makes sense. If you found, we do have a user security in details video way back almost a year ago. Some of you are familiar with that. And I think having that type of security in an application like this is pretty important. So I think towards the end, we're going to add in user login and per sheet security. I think that's a really good idea to bring that type of security into a payroll, especially something as sensitive as payroll. You can't just have any employees looking up payroll records. So it's a very sensitive data, so we want to protect it. Hashim Khan, so I suppose I have a manpower of 5,000 employees. They will need vacation. So we're going to focus on vacation, exit, resignation, or terminate. That would be for events. So I think we're going to include an events manager in this. And then Randy Austin. I don't know who this guy is. Some crazy guy. Make this application shareable. These are my ideas. Yes, shareable. I'm going to try to build this application so that the front end and the back end are always separate, because having multi-user ability with this application would be really great. We want multiple people to be able to make changes nearly at the same time with this application. To do that, we'll use a shared workbook, but we don't like Excel's version of shared workbook. We want to create our own so that we can share with anybody in the world using simply any kind of a shared folder like Dropbox, Google, Microsoft OneDrive, or pCloud, or some of the other great types of shared. So those are the suggestions. Keep those ideas coming. I really love them, and they're really going to help us form this application. So let's get started into the application, and I've got some ideas and some changes that we want to make. And first of all, we're going to add some more tabs to this because based on your ideas, we want to do that. So let's add one more called scheduling. We know we need to focus on scheduling. And perhaps another one called leave. A lot of you mentioned leave, absences. So we're going to keep it very general and call it leave. We can copy this formatting here that we have in the other tabs over to the new tabs. And then we'll paste that formatting. Then we can go ahead and go into conditional formatting and just update that to make sure it's all set right. Into the manage rules. We don't need two of them. We just need one of them. So let's update this one all the way until J4, which is what we want. Everything else is fine, and we can delete this one. Now we have one conditional formatting rule from E4 to J4, and that constitutes all of our tabs, so we can check that out and then close it. We'll move over all the way to the selected column here, 5. If we change this to 7, it goes over to payroll history. And then our new tabs will be 9 and 10. So let's look at that. That looks right. And then J, leave. So that looks right also. Okay, so we have the conditional formatting set up. Now we'll update the VBA code so that we can get those. Now we'll notice we've ended at 145, so we need to update these to include everything from 145 to 164 on the scheduling, and then for the leave we're going to go from 165 all the way to 184 on that. So we need to include those in that. Let's go ahead and go into the developers and the VBA and update our code accordingly. If we just update the code into the sheet 1, we have each E4 to H4 on the selection change. We'll need to update that to J4. And that's not going to be quite enough, but we need to go into the tab macros and make adjustments on here as well, and I'll show you why. If we were just to click on the scheduling, it's going to go to the earnings information because we add 20, so we need to make some considerations for that. In other words, we've added 20 here, we add 20 here, we add 20 here. Payroll detail includes a lot, so so anything after that we have to compensate for that. In other words, scheduling is going to really start on 145, so we need to update the code for that, and we can do that in our Excel macro here under the tabs macro here. So we can make a consideration for that here. And in this code, we want to say add some additional, first of all, we need to change this to 184 because we're going to increase the number of rows, so we want them all hidden. Also, we need to make a consideration for the selected column. If the selected column is greater than 8, right, because our new ones are 9 and 10, greater than 8, then the selected column equals selected column plus 3. And what that's going to do is in our formula here, it's going to add additional rows onto that. It's going to add additional rows. Let's take a look at that and see how that works. So because we have to add additional 3 because we've used a total of 60 rows or 80 rows in our payroll. So additional 60, a total of 80 for our payroll. So we need to add for that. So when we go click on scheduling, let's fix that. That should be selected, SEL. And when we add that onto that, let's take a look at it now. So now we've got 145. That looks right, 145. And then when we got leave, 165, perfect. So that's what we want. So we can now update the formats. Now we can work with the scheduling. So from 145 to 164, that is our range right here. We can format those cells. Let's raise it up, format those cells, and add the borders to that. We're not going to add the underborder. We're going to add that on 185 because that's the last row. So let's do that now. 185 is here. We'll add a top border to that. We'll raise it up so you can see it. Format those cells, and we're going to add a top border. That's going to be our default blue, which is here, and a medium thickness, which is here. So we're adding that top border because this 185 is always going to be seen. So that's important. Now we can do the same thing in leave. Let me just check that scheduling. We need to add out. We need to remove the bottom border from 145. 145 was our previous bottom, so we need to remove that, format those cells. That was our previous bottom, so we need to remove that because it's no longer our last row. Now 185 is. There we go. So now 185 is. Also on leave, we need to add, so now we've got 185. It's looking good. We just need to add the borders on the leave, and that's going to give us our full tab effect. Then we can start filling them out. Again, format those cells, and then we'll add the right and left borders. Okay, so now we've very simply, we have our full tab area: general info, time clock history, payroll history, scheduling, and leave. Now we've got everything set. Now we just have to fill in the details. Let's fill in. Let's start with scheduling on that. I want to add a weekly schedule, so let's call it weekly schedule. And perhaps weekday is going to be our first column. Workday, I need to know if it's a work day or not, if they're off or it's a work day, what the start time is, what the end time of that day is, and perhaps the total break hours. So let's put break hours, and then the total hours will be a formula. Okay, and first day Monday, started off Monday, and then we'll continue down all the way till Sunday on that. And then I'll right justify them. All right, there we go. And we can do a work day. What I want to do is I want to know if it's an off or if it's a work day. I want to create a data on that. So let's go ahead and put it in data validation. Just gonna have two options on a list. Is it going to be off or is it going to be work day? Work day or off, separated by a comma. And now we have the options. Perfect. So let's go mark these as work days. And then we'll do Saturday and Sundays off, just to put some data in there so we can see where we're going on that. And I'm going to conditional format those. And for start time and end time, I want to create a drop-down list of times so that users have some control over that. Why don't we go down, start at 185. I'm going to create a list here of times. I just want to start it here so that's always visible and something out of the way. Starting out at 12 o'clock. a.m. I want to include all times because you never know when shifts start. And I want to increment it every 15 minutes. Now, how do I get 15 minutes? I want to make sure, I'm going to use a formula. So we know a day is 1. So equals 1 divided by 24. That's going to be 1 hour. But what is it if it's 15 minutes? Well, that's divided by 4 again, right? So divided by 4 again, and that's going to equal 10040.0. So that's our 15-minute increment. Copy that, and I'm just going to paste the value because I'm only concerned about the value. And now what I want to do is I'm going to copy that, Control C, equals 12 a.m. plus that number. Good, that's what I want. Now I can continue down that, and you see how we got increments. So now we're going to go all the way down for a full day's schedule. And let's continue down all the way. We're going to go all the way to 12 at midnight. So that'll be our list. 5:30 a.m. too far. Okay, here we go. 12. So the last time will be 11:45 p.m. So that's our list. That's our times list. Let's capture that list, and we will call that just times. So now we've got our times set. So now we can use that in our drop-down list, and it's going to cover all of them. So start and end times here. We can use that as our data validation and bring that in, and I'll be at a list, and it's going to equal times. All right, there we go. Now we've got now we just have to format them accordingly. So let's go into home, and we can format them as time, but I don't really want the seconds on here. So let's modify that. And just go to, say, this. You can use whatever times, based on your current. I'll just use this, so 12:45 a.m. and then we'll probably center or left justify it. Either way is good. So now we've got our times in there. We'll format this table. Let's merge and center this, and we'll use our darker fade for this theme, which is the blues filling. We're going to go from medium to to a little bit lighter. So the fill effects, will create a fill effect because we have two different fill effects. One's for our header. This one is going to be used from dark, and then the one below that will create just one lighter. On this one, we'll center it, format those cells, and we'll go ahead and give this a fill effect of just a little bit lighter here. So it'll go to our medium and then to our light blue. That'll give us a nice fade out effect for both of them. We can give it the border, inside border of the lines, so use those thinner lines for the inside, and also we can use a top border. So that gives us a nice fade effect. And I want to create this schedule, and we're going to use this for each employee. We'll focus on the data aspect of it a little bit later on. Right now we're just creating the information. We don't want to use connected to a data just quite yet, because we want to make sure that we have everything set just the way we want it. All right, let's create some borders, and I'll keep this blue, and this is not going to be user entry, so we'll keep this darker because the whiter we want user entry white, or so these fields are going to be for user entry, these fields are going to be for user entry. Let's color those white and then give it a alternating color as well, so that it's a little bit easier to see using conditional formatting. Or there's a few ways. This is only a few cells. Using the mod, which we've done before, and then we'll use our, and then that'll fill our row. Remember, this comma could be semicolon depending upon your different conditions. Fill effects, and let's go into fill effects, because I'm going to use a blue that I've used before, which is here, and that's common. And then we have recent colors when we use fill effects, even though we're not using two colors, we're using the same both top and bottom, but our color, we can easily locate our recent colors when we use fade effects. Okay, that's good, and give it some borders, and then we'll be done with this, and we can move on from that. I'll scroll up so you can see it, format cells, and then we will give it a lower border, and then a dotted line for the center, then maybe a line here. Let's continue dotted line. Okay, so we're good with that. We've got that formatted. Alrighty, we're going to keep this dark because that's going to be a formula, and we're going to keep this, and let's go ahead and add that formula in now just so you can see. We're going to finish, just do a 6 o'clock p.m., 9 a.m., and then we'll copy that down. Just a standard schedule for those days. 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. with a 1 hour break. That's going to be 8 hours total. So in this case, it's simple math. Equals, and then we'll have to multiply it times 24, equals end time minus the start time, and then we also want to subtract the break too, but the break is in 1 hour. You see the break is 1 hour, and we have this equals, so if we were just to do this, right, we'll get to 9 a.m. That's not really what we want. We want a number, so let's go to number, right? But 0.38 is not what we want either. We need to multiply this times 24 because we need to know it by the hours. So it's going to be 9 hours. And of course we have to subtract the break now. So minus the break hours. And that will give us our total hours, which is 8 hours. And we can copy down that formula. We'll just copy that and bring just the formulas. I don't want to mess with the conditional formatting. And there we go. So now when we add in the times, we can copy down this on our work days and paste those values in there, and then also the break. So any differentiation in time is going to result in our different time. So that'll be really helpful. Let's center this as well. We can center both of these. Okay, so now we've got our total hours. So if we just make a slight change to 6:15, change it to 8 1/4, this brings our hours. Once again, we need to multiply this times 24 because in Excel, 1 equals 1 day. So we have to remember that. So if break hours, so we have to differentiate between that. I just want to add some conditional formatting here for the off days. So let's highlight these, and then we'll add some conditional formatting. New rule. We'll use a formula, and we're going to start with the first possibility. It's also the first row of our conditional format. So the first row of the possible change, it's also the first row of what it's going to apply to, which is F4. Now we also have to remove this $. We do not want that fixed. We need to use that for all the affected rows. Equals off, in parentheses. If this is off, then I want to format this. And what do I want to format it? Let's just make it a gray, fill it in with a little bit gray, a light gray, and then we'll use the font of a little bit darker gray. So that way our off days are clearly differentiated between our on days. And now we see if we were to change the day to off, it'll work. Okay, great. So that's working just fine. We've got our schedule set up. Let's add some totals in there. Total work schedule. Just so we know the total hours, total breaks maybe, and net working time, which means our actual working time. And let's go ahead and add some colons into that so it's uniform. And then we'll right justify it, color that a little bit differently, and give it a darker color because it's a different type of total. Give it art. And format this. I'll scroll up, format that for you. All right, there we go. And put some lines and our dotted line as our vertical. Now we just have to add those totals. Let me raise this up so we have a little more viewable area. All right, now we can add in our totals. Our total work schedule would simply be the sum of all of the total hours. Say plus the total breaks here. Sum of our total breaks. And we give our total hours, which is 45. And then, of course, we're going to subtract the total breaks equals. And first, we're going to sum our breaks. And we can just all of our break hours here. So we have 1 per day, 5 total break hours. And then it's a simple subtraction equals total work schedule minus the total breaks, and that'll give us 40, which is our total hours. So now we've got our net working time, total breaks. So we're set up on the schedule, and it's very flexible. Let's save those changes. Now we can move on to leave. Now, a lot of you mentioned many different types of leave, so we want something that's really open and allows you to put in all types of leave. So let's call this annual leave because we're going to annualize it. It's much easier. When we annualize our totals, it's easier to break it down for whatever pay frequency you may have, as there's different types of pay frequencies. So we're going to have leave type, and then we need to know if it's paid or non-paid. That's important for the payroll. We also want to know if it's clear annually. If it's cleared, that means does it accumulate, or we can call it accrued. Accrued annually, meaning does it accrue? Does it carry over? If you don't use all of your leave in a single year, does it get carried over or not? So that's very important. So we want to know if it's carried over. Next up, we want to know the annual hours allowed. And then we also want to know how many were used. That's important. And of course, hours remaining. So we can keep track of how many hours were remaining. That's important. All right, let's format this. We're going to use the same type of formatting. Let's see if we can copy this over, if it allows us to do it. If it's exactly, and then we can use that same formatting. There we go. That'll save us some good time. Next up, we want to include this table probably till about, let's say here. We want to keep that. In fact, let's just color these. I want to color only the ones that the users are going to be entering data in here. Color that, give that a white for now, and then format those. Those are going to be our user entry fields. Format those cells, and we'll put the border, same type of formatting. Use the dotted line for the center, and use a solid line for the bottom. And then let's again use conditional formatting so that we can alternate the rows. You're going to get very good at this. We've done it so many times. On our mod formula, going to keep a same consistency throughout the table. That's always important. The fill effects, and then use our common light blue color here in our fill effects. Okay, not that one, that one. There we go. All right, so we're good with that. Now we've got that covered, and let's put a little bit of line here. We can do this. This is kind of a nice effect. Let's go a little darker on this one. and we'll do a conditional formatting because these are going to be protected with formulas. So we're going to also do the same thing, equals mod, but we're going to use a different color, a little bit darker of a color on this one. Perhaps something like this. Yeah, that'll be fine. And then so that gives us the alternating effect, but it's a little bit darker color. So now we can see it's got a nice effect. And what kind of a leaf type? This I'm going to leave open. You can put in any leaf type you want, paid or non-paid. We'll use a drop-down list, something just very simple, using data validation so that we know if it's going to be paid or not paid. Just a list, and then have both of those options available. Paid and then non-paid. Okay, so we have those options, and then we'll be able to put in how many hours you want, how many hours allowed, and true or false, something like yes or no, maybe yes or no if it's accrued annually. Okay, let's update the spelling on that correctly with 2 L's. So we can put in just yes or no on that on the data validation. So that'll give us the ability to automatically know whether we should pay it or whether it should carry over or not, so we can use that. Also, I want to put in a paid time off. Now, many companies, they give you a certain amount of paid time off based on the work that you're currently doing. So for example, for every month you work, you might get 2 hours of paid time off. So let's put that in there, earned paid time off. It's also known as PTO, paid time off, in many instances. So let's create a PTO status. That means is it currently active or not? So that's going to be, and then we want earnings rate per hour. And this is going to be a very small decimal. Earnings rate per hour worked. So for example, it could be 0.005, so it means every hour you work, you earn another hour, something like that. It's usually a very small decimal, so that maybe you get 1 hour worked for 1 hour of paid time off for maybe 50 hours of work. So it comes into a decimal. And then the annual max. Often there's a maximum. You can't keep earning annual max in hours. So there might be a maximum that you once you hit that max, you can't continue earning. So that's important. And then we're going to have we also want to know how much you've accrued. Accrued PTO would be how much you currently earned or taken off, how many are used, and what's your balance. So we need to know, so let's say you've earned 10 hours in the year, but you've only used 5, your balance is going to be 5. So we want to put that in there. Let's format these accordingly based on our formats that we set up previously in the last one, cell styles, and we'll use the field label. And then in these 3, we're going to, because these are user entry, so we'll put our cell style as our field here. And then we can do the same thing here, except we're going to have to recolor that. We're going to have to recolor that back to blue because I don't want, these are automated and calculated, so we want these actually to be in blue. So we're going to put those back to our background blue, which is here. Okay, that was good, and we'll update the borders accordingly. Make sure it's all formatted accordingly, and then we're going to be done with the time off for now. We will come back to it later on when we're adding data, but I wanted to make sure that we have. So now we've got to capture annual leave. Let's copy this and paste the formatting here, so we can use the same formatting. Paste those formats for that, so it's a header. All right, that looks good. Let's lighten that up a little bit. It's a little bit dark. We use this when we have 2 tables. I want to use something like this, so not quite that dark. Just want to remain consistent throughout the application so that you get a really good look and feel of a professional application. That's what we're creating. We're creating a professional application that can hopefully be used around the world. So we're going to try to keep it simple, but keep it powerful. So we want that. So consistent look and feel is important for that. All right, now we've got it. Now we've got our scheduling, we've got our leave. And let's update, there's some fields I want to update with the general info as well. So let's go ahead and do that. I've made some updates, some ideas based on your suggestions. I also want to know if it's active, and I want to know additional information. So I also want to add attachments here too, so that's important. I want to add file attachments. That's really important because I want to give the user the ability to attach specific files to a specific employee. So we're going to add that in, and it's kind of important because there's always some hard document or some scanned-in document that you want to do. So let's go ahead and add that in now. File name, we want to know the file type. We can add the file path, that's very important, the entire path. And perhaps who it was added by. This is going to be multi-user, so we want to know who it was added by and when it was added on. We'll leave this blank. I think we'll eventually use this field. I'm not sure for what. Yes, we'll just keep that there. Let's copy and paste this formatting. I want this formatting, our header table, and bring it right in here. Paste special and then format, so we can use that same formatting for our table. Yeah, that's the look I'm looking for right now. I want to update some fields here. We based on your suggestions, we want to put gender in there. Let's put gender here. And I'm going to put hire date. That's kind of important. Hire date. Make just some updates to these fields. Make this position. And I'm going to make this active. I want to make this active or non-active. Active, and so you can put an active, or we can, yeah, we can change that up. All right, so let's do act. That way you know if it's active or inactive. And position, we'll just put owner or something like that, manager. So we've got that, and let's update those formats because we're going to add a few of them. I want to base it on your suggestions. So, all right, good. We've updated that, and now we'll go ahead and update this as well. So we have everything consistency. Now we've got our fields. We're going to put our picture right in here. That's why I'm leaving this blank. Let's do that now. Let me see if I have any shapes saved on here. Picture, no other shapes. So we'll create our shape for our picture here. We can bring in some shapes that we have. Insert, we want to put a box for the picture, and I want to put a default picture there as well. That's kind of important. We'll put the size down there, perhaps make it vertically long, and then maybe around one. That's a box. I want to put that picture right here, and of course I also want to not put a fill in there, so we'll clear that fill out, just the border. And the border's a little bit. Let's bring this down while we're working with it, and give it the same colors as shape outline. That's a little bit too big of an outline. I also want to create a that looks good. I also want to create a box for to add the picture. So we're going to copy this and paste it, or Control D works, and bring this down. I want to make it a button down here, and I want to be able to add a picture with this button here. Okay, so let's bring in some shapes. So what I want is, I want this button to be clicked when we're adding a picture, and I want this box to contain the picture or contain our default picture. So let's insert that now. We'll go into the pictures. I've got some saved up to save some time. We're going to use this, and then I'm going to use these buttons, I think, at some point. So let's import those now. Okay, so let's bring everything over here. We'll focus on just this one. This is our default picture. I like this, so we'll size it accordingly. All right, but I don't like the black color. I want to give it a color. I want to color it very close to what we're working with, which is about there. Okay, now we've got our color set up, and I like that as a default picture. And but I need to crop it. Look, it's just too big, right? There's nothing going on. So let's crop the picture and bring it just to just only what we need it, because we don't want it overlapping. We just want the big, because it was a larger picture, so we can crop it using this. If you haven't used the crop feature, it's really, really handy in Excel. It's not a bad cropping tool for Excel. Okay, and then we'll just click crop. Now we've cropped it. Good. So now when we click here, it's not going to give us an issue when we click the button. So we've cropped it. We have our default picture. I'll add some text into this box. Add picture, and we'll color that a picture. It's white now, but we'll change the font color. No worries on that. To our default blue color, and I'm going to right justify it so that we have room for a button, and put that to center. And we can increase the font a little bit and make it bold. That's good. Oh, there's one other shape I wanted to bring in, and but that's an icon, so we need to go into our all pictures and do actually all files. It's this icon here that I wanted to bring in. So let's insert that. That's going to be used for our button icon, so we can bring that right in here. All right, that looks nice. We can increase this font a little bit, make it a little bit bigger. That's good. All right, we've got enough space, so no problem. We can group these two. I want to make a button out of it, so I'm going to group them. Now they're grouped. That's perfect. And let's give this a name called this default picture. This will show up when we have no specific person or no specific employee picture. We can use this. It kind of signifies what to do. So it's a good placeholder, and as well shows what the user, makes it very simple for the user. All right, let's now we can go ahead and focus on that. We can add a macro to this so that we can actually add a macro. And you might be familiar, if you see my videos, to where we're adding and placing a picture, because I've used it with inventory and a few other videos. So you may be familiar with it. We'll write it up real quick here. All right, so into the VBA we'll go, Visual Basic, and we'll create a new module. We will call this Employee Picture Max or whatever, just something specific so you can easily recognize it. We're going to have a lot of modules in this, so you want to be consistent. Employee Picture Max. This will cover us, and basically it's just going to be two macros, one to add and one to display. So let's start on the add one. Sub add employee. Let's go add employee pick. Okay, that's going to be our sub, and first we're going to dimension the picture file as a file dialog. We need to know that. All right, and next up we're going to focus on sheet 1, so let's with sheet 1, because that's what we're going to set that picture file equal to application file dialog. And then MSO, of course, we're going to do file picker. We need that file picker. That's the one we're focused on. So, of course, with that picture file, we're going to do some things with that. We're going to set a title for that. And title is going to be equals select. This is going to be the title that shows up, an employee picture. Of course, you can put any title you want here. And we're going to add the filters. Remember, we have filters. We're only going to allow pictures on that. So we need to add filters. We need to add those filters. And what filters are we going to be adding? We're going to add JPG, JPEG. I'm going to add a few different ones. In fact, let me just save some time. I've got it listed somewhere else. I'm going to copy those from where I've got it listed. And we're going to copy those here. We're going to say all, give it a name for that filter, pictures, all picture files, and then comma, and then we'll just go ahead and put those in. Okay, so we've got that covered. That's going to help us. So we need to know what those filters are. And next up, if we need to know if they have not selected, what should we do if they don't select, or if they don't select, if they cancel without. If dot show does not equal -1, that means they have not selected anything, then go to no selection. Just skips everything else, selection. So right down under, before the end of the sub, we'll just put no selection. That's going to skip everything else in case they have not selected, in case they selected nothing. So we've got that. So in case that happens. All right, next up we can do sheet 1. We're going to set, we want to set a specific range to put this file path. We can use J10. J10 is right in the middle of the picture, and we're going to eventually hide that. But for now, we're going to put it into J10 value equals, what is it equals? Well, it equals that path. That path is dot selection, selected items, which is going to be that one first item, and that's going to put the file name, puts the file name in J10, so we know where that's going. All right, so we're done with that, and then it just says we have to also, let me just put a note here because we're going to add to this, on existing. Not only do I want to put it there, I want to put it in the employees database if we have, but right now we don't have an employee, but we're going to be adding it in very shortly. So on existing employees, add or update, right? Add or update This is a little bit of a reminder for us, the employee picture. So not only do I want to put it on the screen, I want to put it right in that whole file path in the employee's file. That's very important. Add or update employee picture in database. We'll just put database there. That's a little reminder. We're going to add that in right now, right a little bit later on, but for right now we'll add that code there. So that's good. That's gonna add the picture, but it's not going to place it and it's not going to display it. It's just going to put the file path. So now we need to write the macro that's actually going to display it. So let's write that sub show employee picture. Now we can write that. So we're going to focus on that. And of course, dim the picture path as a string, because we need to know the path of that picture. And we're going to define it as a string with sheet 1, because we're focused only on sheet 1 for the one. And then what I want to do is I want to, if there is a current employee picture, I want to delete it. So I want to remove that, but it could, if there is none, it could cause an error. So we're going to do on error resume next, and then dot shapes, because we're working with sheet 1. We're going to call it, this employee picture is going to have the same name no matter what, employee pic. And that's going to be the name of our shape, and I'll show you that. But right now we're saying if it exists, delete it, because we're about to add a new one. We don't want to have multiple pictures with the same name, so we want to make sure to delete anything with that name before we add it. So let's delete that, and then basically it says delete, put a note here, picture if it exists. And the reason we wrap that in error is because if it doesn't exist, it's going to cause an error. So on error, go to 0 there. And so that way it'll start and stop. This, when we wrap this in on error resume next and on error go to 0, this prevents errors if the picture does not exist. If it does exist, it's going to delete it. Okay, now we can focus on, now let's get the picture path. Now, what if that picture path is empty? First, we're going to define the picture path. Picture path equals, remember it's J10, equals dot range J10. So we know that that's the path of the picture. Okay, but what if it's empty? If the picture path equals empty, then what should we do? Empty. Then, well, what I want to do then is I want to show the default picture. I want to show that, because remember we set that default picture, dot shapes, default picture, dot visible equals MSO true. So we want to show that, else that means it's not. Okay, actually we can just exit the sub, because there's not going to be nothing. We're going to set the default picture and then we can exit. So that's fine. We can do just that. We don't need to move on with placing it because there is no picture. All we do is show the default picture and exit the sub. So we're good with that. Now when we continue, we can show the default picture. So now we can continue. Dot shapes, and then if we want to hide in this case, if there's no picture, we're going to show, let me just go over this again. If there's no picture, we're going to show the default picture and exit out. But if we go beyond this point, that means there is a picture. So now we need to hide the default picture. Equals false, right? So we have a picture, so we don't need to show the default picture. So we want to hide the default picture, not delete it, just hide it. Just hide it. And then what we can do is with dot pictures, insert, what are we inserting? The picture path. Picture path. Okay, good. And now with the shape, we need to name that with dot shape range. What are we going to do with that shape range? First, we're going to lock the aspect ratio. Okay, and next up, we're going to set the height. And the height's going to be, let's say, maybe about 95 or so. And then we're going to give it a name, dot name. What is the name? We're going to give it that employee picture. It's going to have that same name no matter what, employee pic. That's the name we're going to assign to it. So we want to make sure that that's set. Okay, so we've got this and we've got this. Now let's close our end with. I think we're missing an end with. Let's take a look. There we go. It's down there. Okay, we're good. That's the end width. Okay, let's just show that this is the width, just not with the shape range. This is the width with the picture, with the pictures. And this is the width with the sheet, just so we know sheet 1. Just so we know all of it, because we got 3 different widths, so I want to make sure that we're focused on the right one. Okay, now we've got it, but now we need to display it where we want to display it. So now we can focus on width dot shapes employee pick. That's the name that we've just set. What are we going to do with that? Well, the first thing, we're going to put it on the left. Right? We're going to put it right around. Let's see. Let's take a look back. I think it's going to be. I'm going to put it at I6, or I'm going to put it at I5, and then I'm going to adjust it. So we're going to start out right around I5. That's where I want to put it. So I'm going to say left equals sheet 1. I need you to use sheet 1 here. I need to use sheet 1 here because the width is with the shape. So we need to specify sheet 1 range I5 dot left, the left of I5, and then we're going to put top, and then also we're going to use sheet 1 I5 as well. So we're going to the top near that same equals sheet 1 and then top, and then we're going to increment it left, dot increment left maybe around 50 because I want to move it to the right, and I want to move it down a little bit, maybe about 15. Increment top, so I don't want it right at the top, I want to move it down. So I want to move it a little bit to the right and a little bit down. So that's good with that. And then I think that's it. Let's take a look at that. Let's go ahead and copy this. Because we're going to use that for our button, so I want to copy that. And now we can assign the macro. What we want to do is, this is the one, this is the group, not this one. This one, we want to assign the macro. Right click, assign the macro, and then paste it because we just copied. Of course, we only have 4 macros, so it's pretty easy to find at this point. Okay, well, let's take a look. All right, now we click on Add Picture, and we'll click on the Add Picture, and I've got some pictures here, and click OK. All right, now we have our range. That's perfect, just the way we want it. But now we need to run that other macro and place that. So let's do that. Okay, we need to mark that. That last aspect ratio should be true because we need to lock it. So MSO true. That should be set to true. Okay, and let's resume this. Okay, let's take a look. All right, that looks just about good. Now we've got our picture. Let's add another one just to look, just so we can change both of them. Add this girl here. All right, okay, good. Change it over. And now we have our link, and that's important, but we don't want it, it really doesn't look ugly. So first of all, we don't want it to bleed over, so let's add a double space here. Puts there. And now let's change the font. We've got it. So let's change the font here and make it the same color as our background color so we can hide that link. There we go. Now it's hidden, it's positioned very nice, and we can change it. So it's good now. We are set with the employee picture. So we're done with that. We've got it placed there. And we're going to add, of course, the employee database in sheet 2, and then we're going to be able to continue with that by adding all the details from there. So let's do that. But let's create some buttons first using our icons here, because I want to add new, I want to cancel, I want to be able to delete employees and do all of that right in here. So let's size these icons accordingly. We're going to group them and then format, not group them, but select them within a group. 0.23, I want to make them smaller because they're a little bit too big. Let's create a button, create multiple buttons. We'll start out with just one, get the formatting and the placement just right, and then we can duplicate that. I want it about the same height as this here, just so everything's consistent. That looks good. And then we'll format it consistent with our theme. Use this blue. And first let's add new. Okay, and then we're going to create this button and right justify it and put it in the center. And that's I don't have so much space to work with here, so let's remove some of the padding on this. So go into the format shape, and on the text I want to remove some of this padding on the right, maybe to 0.03. So that means our text is going to be moved over a lot. We don't have a lot of space to work with on this, so we want to. And now let's put the icon appropriately. It's going to be in back, so let's undo that. and take all of them and move them to the top. We want all of them in the front, so we can do that with all of them. Otherwise, we're going to have to do them individually. Bring to the front. Okay, that'll cover it. Now they're all in front. So now when we drag it over, it's going to be on top. Let's zoom in, take a look at that, check the sizing. That looks right. Holding down the control, selecting both of them, I'm going to group them. All right, that looks good. Now we can duplicate that. Let's duplicate Control D, Control D, Control D. So we're going to create multiple ones, and then of course we're going to remove the icon. And all right, ungroup those. And let's make this the cancel new. Cancel new. We need to make this one a little bit wider. This button here. So into the format, we can also zoom in and drag it. 1.1. That looks good. Okay, and we use the correct icon for cancel, which would be this one here. So bringing that up, gonna have to move that to the back. Let's move these buttons to the back. Let's go ahead and ungroup these because we don't need them grouped right now. And then move these to the back, all of them to the back. Move into the back here. Okay, now the icons are displayed and we can zoom in. We don't need to squint our eyes. Cancel new. Bring this around. We can move the picture down. We don't need that there. Okay, so cancel new looks good. The sizing looks good. Move the icon over, holding the control, selecting both. We're going to group that, and let's give this a name, cancel new button. It's always good to name these. And let's give one of them, we have our add new. This is our original add new, so let's give this add new button. Okay, and let's also create a delete. We're not going to be putting a lot of text, so we don't have a lot of space. Here, delete. It's just delete is enough because we don't have tons of space. Change the icon out using this icon. And then we're going to shrink that button down just big enough because we don't have a lot of space we're working with in this instance. And then we have one more. Let's see, what else do we need? We need save new. Now for existing, we're going to be saving automatically, but for new, save new. So we'll use this icon for this. We don't need this icon. You can delete that. Okay, so we have our buttons. Again, shrink it down just a little bit. All right, now we've got our buttons all set up. We're just going to use those 4 buttons. That covers the basic properties. We've got that, we've got that. Now we're going to group them accordingly. Now we want save new and cancel new. Those are both together, right? I want these 2 buttons displayed when we have a new record, or when we're in the new record. I also want to align them. Let's go ahead and align them in the middle. And we'll group those because I want those to be used. So this group is going to be called new employee group. I think that's what I want to call it. And we'll call this existing employee group. Bring those to add new and delete. Those are going to be, I only want those visible for existing. Let's shrink this one down a little bit. We don't have a lot of, we're going to increase the column just a little bit as well. We can do that. And then we also want to make sure to set the properties on these. Holding down the control, let's align them vertically, align the middle, and then group them, and we'll call this existing employee group. Okay, did I use an L for here? Nope, new employee group. Okay, those are good. Now we also want to place those right on top of each other, and that's too big. That's okay for now, but we want to place them on top of each other because only one's going to be displayed at the same time, so we can do that. That's no problem for now. Let's align them. Align the middle so everything's set up, and let's move it over here. Okay, that looks good. Let's change this to let's shrink this down. This text here, just call it employee ID. That'll give us some more space. Employee ID. Okay, that gives us some more spacing, so we have that. All right, we're looking good on the buttons there. and this picture can move back, but it's going to place by itself. We don't need to worry about that. Now we've got our buttons set, and we're going to change them based on that. And whoa, one more thing we need to do. We want to make sure that we position, but if we don't size. So right click, so when we change those columns, I don't want the buttons to size. Size and properties. And under the properties, we want move, but don't size. We don't want to size. If we increase these columns, we don't want the buttons to change. So that's important. All right, next up, we're good. Let's go ahead and add our employee list right now. We can go ahead and create a new sheet, starting with sheet 2. Let's call this employee list. And we can also name the current employee sheet. Just call this employee manager for now. We can change it. We're not going to use sheet names within the code, so we can change them at any time. Employee sheet. Here we go. Well, let's start out. I want to create this first row as probably our data mapping so that we can easily hide it. So let's just give that a color of gray. This is something that's going to be hidden. We're going to use this for our data mapping, and I'll show you what that is. Then, of course, row 2, we'll start that out as employee list, and then our headers are going to be covered there, so we have that. I've done this in a sample, so I want to save some time because I've got a lot. We're already an hour here, so I'm going to pull up a sample I did recently, and I'm going to copy over some data, and then I'll just go over it with you on that. Here's the sample I'm working on. You can take a look at this. We've got it all figured out. We've got our mapping. I'm going to copy this. This will save us a lot of time. We're going to paste that right in here. And then let's go over that. Now let's close out. I want to close out the sample too, so we don't get confused which one we're working on. We're gonna use it again in a moment when we call it data mapping. But so this is one we've been working on, and now we've got our employee list here. Now what this is, I've got a bunch of employee IDs here, which we're going to need. We've got a last name, first name, gender, all the fields that we have, and now they're mapped individually. Let's show you that. If you want, when you do your mapping, try it this way. Pull it up so that you have everything in the upper left corner, and use your favorite screen capturing software. I use Snagit, and so I'm going to capture a screenshot just like this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to, with my software, I'm going to copy that. I'm going to bring it right into my employee list, and I'm just going to paste it here temporarily, and this really helps for mapping. So now we've got last name. We know that's in F6, so we put that right here. Excuse me, F6 right here. So we see that. Now we've got address. We know that's in F8, so we can put F8. So it really helps. You don't need to be going from sheet to sheet. So you can look at the screenshot, and it really helps mapping. So address is in F8. City is in F10. So every column is going to be mapped out. And this is going to really help us reduce the amount of code when we're bringing data back and forth from the employee manager sheet. So we see, and we just continue on. And so for everything, we're going to map out the data. Now I've already gone through, otherwise you're going to watch me type all this out, and it's going to be a lot. I've got a lot of test data in there. So basically I've mapped out F16 here, of course, is our active, our status. Let's call this status, okay? That's what I want to call it. It shouldn't be called active. It should be called status. So let's go ahead and mark that status. Indeed, employee manager, status. So that's our status, okay? So that's what I've done. And then when you're done with the picture, just delete it. So we've mapped it out, All right, now here's one issue. Now I've got an employee name, so I want this to be in a drop-down list, but I want the entire name, and I want it to be last name and first name, last name, first name. That's what I want. But here we have in our last name and first name is separated into fields, so we need to combine them. So let's do that. In fact, I've already done it. If you look over in under BB, column BB, you'll see that this has a formula right here, and it's if B4, which is the last name, B, remember B is our last name column. B is our last name column. If it's blank, then return blank. But if it's not blank, what I want to see is the last name, B4, and then a comma and a space and C4, which is different. So that's going to return our entire name here. And then what I want to do is I want to do that for everyone. So we'll copy down. I want to do that for every single one all the way down. So we're going to create that. And so because this is the list that I want to use. Now I need to create a named range. Let's go ahead and look at that into the formulas. Name manager. Now when I copied over the sheet, we only have time, so let's do that. Employee name. So let's create a new one. We're going to call this employee name. And I want to make it an offset formula. It means I only want to show the values. I don't want to be showing a bunch of blank at the end, so we're going to use offset. So we're going to call it equals offset. And this particular offset, because it contains formulas, we need to count the blanks. I can't use count A. Count A counts text, but all of my fields, even those with nothing, have a formula inside. So I can't count text, I can count blank. So I'll show you how that's done. We're going to start out at BB4. That's going to be our first row of data. Let's copy that because I'm going to use that in just a moment, partially. So we're going to copy that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place 3 commas for our offset, 1, 2, 3, and what I'm going to do is I want to count the blanks now. So in fact, the blanks is going to be the total. We're going to start it out, let's say 996, and I'll show you why that's important. 996 minus 996 is going to be all the rows minus, and then what we're going to do is we're going to count the blanks. I need to know the blanks because it's not the blanks that we want, it's the opposite, it's those. That's why we're using subtraction. Count blank. And what is the range that we're going to be counting blank? Let's use 999. Okay, so we'll go all the way down to row 999, but our data starts in row 4. Our data starts in row 4. That's why we're using 996, comma 1. Okay, and let's take a look at that. Let's expand that out so you can look at that and bring it all the way over. Offset employee list 996 minus. So we're going to use all of the range, the entire range. What we're going to do is we're going to count the blanks, and let's see if that's accurate. And we'll tab over there. We'll highlight. We'll scroll all the way down. That's perfect, right? We're using 996 because we're starting in row 4. That's why we have to subtract from 999. So that's going to work out perfectly because if we use count A, it's not going to work because we have formulas. So that's perfect when our contains formulas. When our range contains formulas, we can count blank. Okay, good. Let's do another one. Let's copy this. I want to do it for employee IDs too. So when employee IDs, there's no formula, so we can use count A. New employee ID. And what's the employee ID? I'll just paste it in, but we're going to use offset in A, column A. In this case, we can use count A. There's no count A. List A4 through A99. And let's take a look at that. Now, for this employee ID, when we take a look at that, that starts out at 4 and goes all the way down to currently 223. So as we add data, this range changes. So we have 2. So this one uses count A because there's no formulas in this. It's just straight data. So we have employee ID and employee name. Okay, good. Let's close that out. And of course, I added lots of sample data. Don't worry about the conditional formatting. It does need to be updated here. It's kind of a mess, the formatting, but we'll worry about that in a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and add a data validation here. Home, data validation, and we want to include this employee. So it's going to be a list and employee name equals employee name. Okay, good. So now we've got that, and now we see this contains our employee name, and it goes all the way down to the last one. Great. So now what do I want to happen is now when I select a name here, I want that information to fill out. And now we need to create some macros that do that. So let's go ahead and create those macros now so we can load that employee data. But before we do that, there's a few additional fields that we want to create here. We need to know some certain information. I need to know if that employee is loading or not. That's going to help us. So let's create that. It's going to be a true or false. So we'll set it to false now. We have the selected column. We have the selected row. We need to know the employee ID row and the employee name. And I'll explain why that's important a little bit later on, but we're going to need that. And employee ID, that's employee ID row, although they should be actually the same, but we'll need them both. Employee name row. So we want both of those. So there's going to use match formulas. And we need to know if it's the employee's new or not. So if we're setting a new employee, we need to know if that's true or false. Now, employee ID row is going to be based on this. So we're going to use a match formula for that. But first, we're going to wrap it in an if error equals if error. And then we're going to use match. What are we matching? We're going to look up this employee ID. And what's the array? Well, we just set that. That's the employee ID here. And of course, we want an exact match, so let's put 0 there. And then comma, and then if there's an error, it's going to be double quotes. Okay, so that's 8. Let's take a look at that. That's not perfectly accurate just yet. 1005. 1005 is in this row 11. It's not 8. We need to add 3 because ours start in 4. So we want to make sure to add 3, then it'll be accurate. So plus 3. Great. Okay, let's copy that because we're going to create a very similar formula for the employee name, except in this it's not going to be J2, it's going to be this, and it's not going to be employee ID, it's going to be employee name. Everything else will be the same. Okay, so now we've got it right. Asian Florist is in row 4, and Aegeon is in row 5. Okay, that's good. And they're different now, but it's fine because we have a different place. 1001, of course, would be for 1002. Everything's working just right. That's the way we want it. All right, so moving on, we have all of our information that we need. Let's color those so we can, these are, of course, are going to be hidden. And we'll put some borders around it just so we can show and display those distinct, so that those clear, give it a different distinct. Of course, these columns are going to be hidden, so that'll be important. That's why we colored them differently, and they're very different because we're going to hide those and protect them. Okay, now we are ready to go within the code. Let's go into the developers, into the Visual Basic, and we'll create another module. We have to, let's see, let's title this module. We need to always give our modules names, so we'll call this, all right, these are employee pictures, and the other one's tab, we named those wrong. Pics, max, okay, and then these are the tab max, so let's set those right, and double click on those, and here, these are the tabs, so let's set those, employee tabs. Okay, now we've got it set up right, and now we can create a new module, insert module, and we will call this employee, okay, and then miscellaneous, because we're going to be putting lots of different ones in this, lots of different macros. The first of which we'll probably put save new. So let's, we'll add employee new, employee load, sub employee load. We want to load those employees, bring them all the data from the database into the actual information. So we need to dimension both employee row and the employee column. Both of those are important. Employee row as long, and of course employee column as well. Employee column as long too. Separate rows. Now I'm going to do it right. First of all, we want to make sure that we have, right, with sheet 1, we'll be working primarily with sheet 1, so we want to use that. And we need to check, we're going to be checking B5. We need to make sure that's not empty. B5 is based on the name. So let's look at that again. B5, right, employee name row. That when they select a name, right, when they change name, this row changes. If they put in something wrong, right, cancel. So it's going to be blank, right? We haven't allowed anything but the name, so but it's going to be blank if it's not accurate. So we need to say if it's blank, then do something. It shouldn't be blank, but if it is, we need to compensate for that within the code because we definitely need an employee row. That's critical. So we can say if dot range B5 equals empty, and we put a little message box. Then message box, please enter a valid employee from the drop-down list. Okay. That way, and then exit the sub. We can't move further unless we have a good employee, an accurate employee. All right, now we can continue. First of all, we need to set B1 to true. And the reason for this is we don't want anything else to happen while we're loading it. We don't want to save to the database. So while we're loading it, we need to set B1 to be true. And I'll show you why that's important in the future. But we want to set B1, at least while this macro is running, and after it ends, we're going to set it to false. So we can set it dot value equals true. And then we're going to set it false before it ends. So let's do that now, just so we set it. And then we'll give it a name just so we know what it is. Set employee load to false. And of course, this one's going to be true, just so we know, properly notating what we're doing in the code, because sometimes we forget. I know I do. To true. Okay, so we've put those in. We know we're setting that up. And that's important because we don't want anything else to happen while we're loading it, and because we're going to make changes that we don't want. So we're good at that. Now what I want to do is I want to go through, I want to get the employee row, I want to get the employee column, and I want to run through all the columns. Basically what I want to do is I want to go through column 1 all the way to 28. And let's go down to the bottom just so you know where we're headed. Equals column. So it's column 1 all the way through 28. I believe it's A 28, right? That's our last column, right? So we're going to, whoops, zoom that in, not necessarily. Let's zoom out a lot. Okay, so 28 is our last column, and AB is our last column with data. Our last column with data, we're just going to have the thumbnails. That's 28. Right, column 28. So I'm going to loop through every single one of those columns, 1 through 28. We don't need this anymore. And what I want to do is I want to figure out what row, and I want to take this and put it in the right place. I want to take this, and we know what right place to put it is because we know that the first name goes in H6, right? We know the first name goes in H6, right? So we've mapped it out properly. So all we need to do is go through this row 1, say J2, F6, put this name. In H6, put this, or whatever it is. So we just get the employee row, we know the employee row, and we need to loop through all those. So that's what we're going to do, but we're going to do it right in the code. We're going to do it right now. So we need to set that loop. So for employee column equals 1 to 28. Now you know it's going to run all the way to column AB, which is 28. So that's going to be our loop. Okay, equals 1 to 28. That's going to be our loop, and make sure we close our loop. Next, employee column, and write everything in between. So that keeps it clean. So for that, here's what we're going to do. Dot range, of course that's sheet 1, so we always had that. Now what is the range? What is the range? Well, the range of that is going to be this or this or this. That's the range. So we know the range is in sheet 2, row 1, and then we just have to change the columns. So that's all we're going to do here. We know we need to get that range. So let's do that. So we know it's sheet 2. And because both the column and the row are variable, we need to use cells. So what is the row? We know the row is 1, right? What is the column? The column is going to rotate employee column. So there we go. Now that is, what is the value of this? This is the range, right? So that's the range. So let's close that dot value, right? So for example, right here, this is going to be H6, F6, B6, or whatever it is. And then we're going to run through that. And this equals, what does it equal? Well, first of all, we need to set, we need to set here, before we do that, we need to set the employee row. Employee row equals, remember it's B5, dot range, B5. Okay, now we set the employee row. So now we know equals sheet 2, and dot cells, what is the row? The row is the employee row. What is the column? The column is employee column. Dot value. That's how we do it. We just run through that loop and all of the data makes it too. So you see it's a little bit more work mapping, but the code is super simple. Otherwise, if not this, we'd have to write 28 lines of code. It would take a long time. So we're changing, because we've mapped it out, we're now taking 28 lines of code and replacing it with just 3 lines of code because we've mapped it. So that's a huge savings, especially when you have a lot of data. All right, now we're good. Now what we need to do is we need to, now that we've loaded this, we need to know that it's an existing. Right? We have our button sets here. We have our existing employee group and we have our new employee group. Well, since we're loading it, it's not a new employee, right? It's an existing employee. So we need to hide new employee group and we need to show existing employee group. So we can do that with this dot shapes, and then we're going to say new employee group, right? It's not a new one, so we want to make sure this is not visible. Visible equals MSO false. And of course, the existing employee group, we want to show that. Exist employee group, we want that to show because it's an existing employee. This is why naming is so important, so it's clear. MSO true. Okay, so that's going to be true. And now we've set B1 to false. Good, we've covered that. And also, this is not a new employee, right? Because we just loaded it, so B6 is also, let's copy this. B6, remember we set that to new employee, or B6, set new employee to false. It's not a new employee. Sometimes we need to know if it's a new employee, but this is not because we just loaded an existing. And also, if there's I want to show the employee picture, right? We have employee pictures. We want to display that. So let's copy that, show employee pic, and we're going to paste it because when we load it, employee miscellaneous, okay. And we want to run the macro that shows that picture. So that's it. That is all we need for the employee row. You see how small that little macro is? All that macro does is loads all that employee data. Let's go ahead and save our project. I always like to save before we run macros. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. And so when we change this, when I make a change, we're going to move these over. It's it's too far over. Okay. We don't want it on the drop-down list. When we make a change to this, we want to load it. We change this. So let's write some code now to do that. Back into the VBA under the employee manager. Now we're going to write some cells. So far we have selection change, but we want worksheet change. This is when we're going to make an actual change. So worksheet change is important. So let's go ahead and write some code for that. Okay, it's a relatively simple code. All we have to do is write, and this is F2, right? If not intersect target, comma, don't forget a comma here, range F2 is nothing, then what are we going to do? Well, we need to make sure before I just load the contact, I need to check for two things. I want to make sure it's not blank. So we need to write another if statement. If range F2 dot value does not equal empty, we need to make sure it's not empty. And we need to also make sure that B5 is not empty. B5 is going to be the row. We need that row. Remember, the employee row? So we need to make sure that's not empty as well. And range B5, our employee row, dot value does not equal empty. Good. If both of those things happen, then we can run the employee. Then employee load. Now we can run the macro employee load. So now let's go ahead and try that out. And now when we change an employee, all right, okay, let's add a T to that. Next employee and run that. Okay, good. Now it's running. There we go. Perfect. And we've already added in some information here. Good. There we go. Our default picture because there is no. So you see that just a little bit of code adds in all the data we want. That's great. Okay, let's focus on our add new. And I know this training is going quite long today, but we just had so much to cover. It's a big project. We've got a lot to cover, so hang in there. We'll get through it. And moving on, let's add in, now we know our employee load is, let's go ahead and add in macros for a new employee. And I've done this before, so I'll try to add this in a little quicker by copying and pasting. Sub employee new. Okay, we're going to add some with sheet 1. And then we also want to, again, B1 I want to mark as true. B1 equals true, so that's important because I want to show as we make changes, that's the employee load. We want to make sure dot range B1 equals true. Employee load, we're going to mark that as false at the end of this macro. Again, do the same thing as we did before, so we can just copy that employee load to false before the end of it, and then everything gets written in between. Okay. All right, so we always want to set because we need that when we make changes. It's important. All right, now we can continue writing our macro. Basically, what I want to do is I want to display, I want to do the opposite of this. So let's copy those and just do the opposite. We're going to, the new employee group, we're going to show, see true. We want to show those, and we want to hide the existing. So that's important. And we also want to remove that, we want to show the display picture, the default picture. We want to show that on new employees because there's going to be no picture, but we want to show the default picture. So let's do that. Dot shapes, default picture, dot visible equals true. We want to show that. And we also want to delete, if there's any existing picture, any existing employee picture, we want to delete it. We want to remove any employee picture. And we want to wrap that in also on air just in case there is no picture. So what we want to do is dot shapes, employee, let me see, EMPL, I want to double check that, pictures, make sure we get the name exactly right. And EMPL picture. Okay, so we got, that's the picture we've assigned to that. I want to make sure we got the name right. Here, EMPL pic, and then dot delete, and then we're going to also on air go to 0. Okay, now we've got that set, we wrapped it. Now what I want to do is I want to clear all the fields, and there's a lot of them, so let's just, I've already written this before, I'm just going to paste it in here. All of those fields, we're clearing the contents. So these are all the fields. I need to clear all the employee fields. So that's all that is. And there's actually more because there's so many in the employee. So let's go ahead and copy that in too. This is basically, these lines of code are just going to clear all of the employee fields, clear the contents. Let's remove that. Let's shrink this up so we get some more space for writing code. Okay, so now you can see everything. All right, next up, what we want to do is we want to set the new employee to true, and we set that at B6. We can copy this, but just change it to true here because this is a new employee, so we want to make sure to mark that as true. B6 is going to equal true, and set the new employee to true. All right, so we've got that. And also, when we create a new employee, if we're on another tab, I want to make sure to set this tab automatically. Right? Because if this is the first tab we're going to focus on for new employees. So let's select with the code E4. And then also I want to select F6 because I want the user to start typing in the last name. So when we do new employee, we're going to select this tab and then we're going to select this cell. So let's write those into that code now. So dot range, E4 select, and then, okay, good. So now that selects the first, let's just write it down, selects general info tab, and then dot range, the first cell we want them to start typing, F6. And that is going to be the last name. Selects last name field. Okay. Very good. Now we've got the last name field selected. Now we've got employee new, and we've got this employee load to false. So that's good. That's exactly how we want it to go. And let's assign those macros back into that. We have our add new. So let's use the control, click the button, and click the icon. Right click, assign macro, employee new. Okay. Before we run it, save our code in case we have any errors or major problems. Okay, that looks good. We have our last name, our first name, and it's automatically selected. That's great. Now we're ready to type in the new name. We haven't created any save new macros or save anything else. And what we'll do is we will continue that. We've already gone way over here. We're an hour and a half. I don't want you to fall asleep. We're going to continue that in part 3. So thank you very much for joining me. I'll do my best to get all of your suggestions in. So please leave your comments, whether it's Facebook or YouTube. And also, if you want me to keep doing this and create an amazing application, please share it. Please like this, show your support so that I can create an amazing employee manager with your suggestions. So thank you very much for joining me today.